Hello, Telvani here, and today I wanted to share with you the Atlas strategy I used to make most of my starting currency in 3.25 Settlers of Kalguur. This strategy has been around since last League, and it has been a pretty consistent source of profits. I am, of course, talking about Tier 7 and Tier 8 essence farming. This strategy revolves around farming essences on the lowest tier map as possible, while still receiving deafening essences. This is because essences don't get any bonuses from higher tier maps and monster levels, and in fact, higher tier essence monsters can become quite cumbersome to defeat. This is one of the reasons this strategy has been popularized on Tier 7. For this strategy, you want a map with multiple bosses like City Square on Tier 8 or Racecourse on Tier 7, as every essence monster you kill will be transferring one of its modifiers to the boss. So by choosing a map with multiple bosses, you end up with 3 bosses that each have like 10 essence modifiers on them, which is much more manageable than a single boss with 30. At the start of the league, the margins on this strategy seemed a lot better, as there were less essences in the game and more people needed them to craft their starting gear. However, I was curious to see if this strategy still holds up a week and a half into the league, after the market has become very saturated with essences, and there aren't as many people crafting starting gear. This is also at a point in the league before it's progressed into the end stage where essences start to go back up in price, as less people are farming them and more players are working on high-tier endgame crafts that take thousands of essences to complete. Basically, I figured at this point in the league, this strategy should be at its all-time worst, but I had a suspicion it would still be pretty damn good. So I decided to run a 40 map test on T8 City Square, noting all of my expenses and throwing all of my loot into a dump tab, so we could see just how strong this strategy still is. Alright, so let's get into it. Starting off, we spent about 115 chaos on chisels, elks, and scours to roll all 40 of our maps. We then spent 3,000 chaos to buy essence scarabs of calcification at 75 chaos each. These scarabs are going to cause every single rare monster in our map to become an essence monster, giving us a ton more essence monsters in our map. The essence scarab of adaptation were 9 for 1 divine, totaling about 666 chaos. These scarabs are going to make it so that we get more essences from the essence monsters in our map. Additionally, they cause your essence monsters to drop a unique item basically every single time. And while most of the time it's going to be some trash tier 1 elk unique, occasionally you'll come across something pretty decent. Next, the Ascent Scarabs bought for 12.5 chaos each, for a total of 500 chaos. These scarabs are going to allow deafening essences to spawn, as without them, essences can only naturally spawn up to Shrieking. And the final scarabs that we are going to be using are the Scarabs of Adversaries, which bought for 2.5 chaos each, for a total of 200 chaos. We will be running 2 of these scarabs on every single map, as the mirrored rare monsters added by this scarab count as a natural inhabitant of the map. So we essentially get 8 extra essence monsters per adversary scarab when used in conjunction with the essence scarab of calcification. Wrapping up our expenses, we will be spending 6 chaos per map to use the Kirek Essence Craft, granting us an additional 4 essence monsters per map. This brings our total expense for this 40 map test to 4,722 chaos, or a whopping 31.48 divines invested into this project. Next, let's take a look at the Atlas passive tree. First off, we are taking all of the essence nodes, as this is an essence strategy. Then, we blocked most league mechanics, pretty much because I was worried about them spawning in and calling out some of the essence monsters, as City Square is notorious for running out of space for mechanics to spawn. Next, we grabbed all of the map sustain nodes that we could to be able to sustain our Tier 8 City Square map pool. We also grabbed some Scarab nodes for a little bit of extra profits, and some Shrine nodes to help us blast down the bosses at the end of the map. Also, since these maps are only going to take us 2 to 4 minutes, having a Shrine up for a minute long and 2 shrines in the map means you'll be buffed with shrines for basically half of the map. Finally, I also decided to grab a few Beyond nodes, mostly because I ran out of things to spend points on, and this might give us a few tainted fusing orbs without really slowing us down all that much. I should note that since this is a Tier 8 mapping strategy, we haven't taken any Eldritch Altar or Maven nodes on the Atlas, as we can't actually use them at such a low tier of map. This is one of the drawbacks to running yellow maps, but the speed at which we are clearing these maps should more than make up for the loss of profits from altars. Alright, next, let's take a look at the loot we received during this test. As you can see, roughly 90% of our revenue is coming from essences and remnants of corruption. I've gone ahead and upgraded all of our essences to deafening, and I've removed any leftover shrieking and screaming essences from our profit calculations. While yes, it may technically be slightly more profit to sell all of your shrieking essences instead of upgrading them, nobody really wants to do that. In fact, I'd really only recommend running this strategy at all if you're willing to use the TFT bulk trading channels. While you will definitely get more bang for your buck if you sell the items yourself, and perhaps even more if you're willing to do some harvest crafting swaps, the amount of time spent manually pricing and selling each stack of essences on the trade website, or even on the currency exchange, really cuts into your profits per hour. It's honestly just so much more convenient to do one trade with some bulk flipper who'll skim just a little bit off the top, rather than spending 30 to 90 minutes after a play session trying to sell everything. But to each their own. Anyway, we pulled about 7,700 chaos worth in essence-related items, totaling 51 divines in revenue from the essence mechanic. Half of the remaining 7 divines in loot we saw during this test came from Scarabs, and the remaining loot that we received came in the form of tainted currency, bubblegum currency, uniques, a divine orb, and a couple fortunate cards I received from having scried Mesa onto City Square. Honestly, you could remove the uniques, the divine orb, and fortunate cards if you don't feel like they're fair to include in the calculations. However, since essences are the overwhelming bulk of our profit from running this strategy, it doesn't significantly change the profit per map. We're talking maybe 5 chaos difference here. Speaking of profit, we pulled close to 59 divines in raw drops from running this 40 map test. And after accounting for the 32 divines we invested into the maps, we are left with a total profit of 27 divines. This averages out to roughly 102 chaos per map. And I've got to say, this is one of the most consistent strategies when looking at variance and profit per hour, because it's all essences that are worth roughly around the same amount as each other. Your worst map is still going to be pretty close to that 100 chaos marker. Conversely, your best map isn't going to be much higher than that either. So this strategy is great if you're looking for a consistent moneymaker, rather than jackpot payouts. Anyway, these maps were taking me anywhere from 2.5 to 4 minutes to run, putting me at roughly 17 map completions an hour. That averages out to 1700 chaos per hour, or roughly 11 divines per hour in profit. I think at the very, very top end of things, you could probably achieve around 20 completions an hour for a whopping 13 divines an hour in profit. However, this would be no breaks, full sending maps, and I don't think many people could reasonably achieve that for a prolonged period of time, myself included. Also keep in mind that I've got a build with a Headhunter and like 60 to 70 million burst DPS, even more with all the Headhunter buffs and shrines active. So for a more casual player, you might be looking at something more like 5 to 6 minute maps, which would drop the profit per hour to 6 or 8 divines, which admittedly is still pretty damn solid for tier 8 maps. One last tip that I'd throw in here is that if you're just concerned about mapping profits, I'd probably skip interacting with a Verisium or a Calcamore, and petrified amber trees. These mechanics can add around 30 seconds to your map, and when the maps are only 3 minutes long, this can be around a 15 to 20% reduction in profits per hour. Crimson ore and bismuth deposits are fine, as they have very little time spent waiting around for monsters to spawn, but Verisium ore has that large charge up when you're just sitting there holding left click, or a Calcum spawns demons slowly around this annoying shrine thing, and it takes a while to kill them all. And the petrified amber trees slow you down with their mini blight lanes. This is all added to the fact that we're in tier 8 maps, so they're only giving you about half of the resources that you'd see in tier 16, and this makes it even harder to justify interacting with them. Anyway, like I say in all of my videos, your actual profit per hour is going to vary based on your speed and luck, but these figures should give you a ballpark of what you can expect running this strategy at the price points discussed. Overall, I was very pleased with the results of this test. I was expecting much lower profits with how expensive the Scarabs had become and the number of essences on the market today. However, I think we've proven that even today, essences is still quite profitable. Anyway, thank you for watching, good luck with your league, and I'll see you in the next one.